These are the last three problems that you're going to see for Algebra A's Test 5, Quarter 3. And so the seventh problem you'll see, which is right here, is going to ask us to complete the square. What should be added to both sides to complete the square? And you're going to end up having to deal with an odd number here. And so all you're going to have to do is just take half of this number. And so you take half of -5 because you're trying to find the two numbers that add to make -5. And those two numbers would be -5 halves and -5 halves. Well, you're going to take that -5 halves and you're going to square it. And that's going to be the number. That's your answer. And so when we square this, we end up with 25/4. That's the number that you end up adding to both sides. So we'd end up putting a 25/4 here and a 25/4 on this side. And so all I did is I just gave you a few problems to practice like that, so we'll just go ahead and do them. And so on this next one, again, same sort of thing. The two numbers that add to make 3 that are both the same. So it's going to be 3 halves and 3 halves. But we're going to take that 3 halves and we're going to square it because that's the number that gets added to both sides, which is 9/4. So I'm going to put plus 9/4 here and a plus 9/4 on this side as well. Well, let's take a look at the next one. We have a -11. So we're going to go ahead and take half of this term. Half of -11 is going to make -11/2. And then from there, we're going to take that -11/2, and we're going to square that number. So when I square that, I get 121/4. And so we're squaring both the top and the bottom of the fractions. That's what gets added to both sides. Last one to practice here. Again, you're going to only have one of these, but I just gave you a few to practice. So take that 7, you take half of it, and we end up with 7/2. Well, you take that 7/2 and square it because you're going to have two numbers that add to make 7 that are exactly the same as 7 halves and 7 halves. But then we have to multiply the 7 halves by 7 halves, so that's why you square it. We end up with 49/4. That is our answer. Well, looking at this next one, you're actually going to have to solve by completing the square. And your number here will be an even number, so the math won't be too tough. We're going to take half of 4, because those are the two numbers now. 2 are the two numbers that add to make 4. See, x plus 2 and x plus 2 add to make the 4x. So we already know the factor form is going to be x plus 2 quantity squared, but we still need to add that number to both sides to make this a perfect square. So we're going to do the same thing we had done over here. We're going to take half the b term and we're going to square it, and we get 4, and that's what gets added to both sides. So we've already factored this trinomial here. We just need to add these two numbers together, and that adds to make 3. So from that point, we're going to take this quantity being squared and take the square root. So when I do that, I'm left now with a x plus 2, and this all equals plus or minus the square root of 3. So I just have one step here. That is to subtract this 2 from all sides. And so when we do that, we'll have our answer of x equals -2 plus or minus the square root of 3. Well, let's take a look at our next one here. This one's going to ask us to solve using that quadratic formula. Quadratic formula, we are, in this case, finding x-intercepts, same thing as solutions. We have to have it set equal to 0, which we do. We have to take a look at our a term, which is 2, b term, which is 4, and the c term, which is -3. So we look at each of those separately, and we plug them into this formula. -b, or the opposite of b, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all over 2a. So we go ahead and do some work. And we have the opposite of b is going to be a -4 plus or minus the square root of b squared. So that makes 4 squared minus 4 times a, which is 2, and c, which is -3. This is all over 2a. And a is 2 in this case. So we go ahead and do some work underneath that radical sign. -4 plus or minus the square root. And 4 squared makes 16. Minus, well, in this case, it's going to be a minus because of the two negatives here. See how we have a negative and negative, so we'll actually have a plus sign here. So watch those signs. Even number of negatives means we end up changing it to addition. Multiply this, we get 4 and 2 make 8 times 3 makes 24. This is all over 4. Well, from that point, we'll just add those two numbers underneath the radical sign. and we get 40. Now in your problem, it's going to be like this, where it's not going to be a perfect square. So you're just going to leave it just like this. That's as far as I'm going to have you take it. So those are the 9 problems that you'll end up seeing on this week's test. Good luck.